Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm going to be covering a topic that's a little bit unusual. So, you know that I run a blog. It's called immortaliumblog.com. I've been posting onto it for, I think, over 3 years now, 2 articles a week minimum. And, you know, it's quite an important part of my life at the moment. But when I am running the website, I sometimes get these things called pingbacks, which basically, you know, mean that one of my articles is connected with something else somehow. And sometimes it can be quite happy, you know, for like a big article, links to one of my articles. You know, I'm quite ecstatic when that happens. But there is an unfortunate situation where I've noticed that a number of my articles are being taken and re-uploaded onto some other websites. And as you can imagine, I was at first furious about this. But when I began looking into it, the general advice was like, unless this is some kind of major website that's actually getting, you know, significant traffic, it's more bother than it's worth to actually go after them and, you know, tell them to take down the articles. But there is one aspect of this that I do find quite amusing. Considering how bad it is to have your work stolen, there is one aspect of this that does bring me some kind of amusement. Perhaps in an effort to reduce the chance of being accused of plagiarism, some of these websites, when they take my articles from my blog, put them through some kind of weird translation system. I'm not exactly sure how, because obviously the article itself is still in English, and I wrote it in English, but somehow from going to my blog to their website, it gets converted into this garbled mess of an article, and I can only assume it's gone through some kind of translation system, you know, going from English to some other languages and then back to English. And I can only assume that's to reduce the chances of being accused of plagiarism, since it is not exactly word for word, even though the contents of the article are the same. So considering that, I thought it might be an interesting idea to kind of poke a bit of fun at these articles and to kind of read them out, to examine some of the bizarre changes, both grammatically and then some words getting changed actually changes the context of the meaning. So I thought that would be quite amusing. Now, of course, I don't want to promote these websites at all. I would highly encourage you not to visit any of these websites, because these websites are doing an awful, terrible thing, taking honest people's work and using them for themselves. So I will not be linking at all to them, but I will read them out, and I will try to put a side-by-side with my own article, you know, the original article, so you can see some of the changes that have occurred. But having said all of that, let's take a look at the first one. And this is amusingly called, even the title I find quite amusing, Why Manga Followers Ought to Know of Shotaro Ishinomori. Now I'm just kind of amused by that, because it's much more casual than I would usually, you know, put it for a title. And there's just something kind of funny about that to me. It's so kind of different. So anyway, I've spoken about a number of essential mangaka on this weblog, I guess, Osamu Tezuka and the Year 24 group being the 2 most evident examples. However, one other essential determinant within the manga trade that I've solely touched on a number of instances is the legendary Shotaro Ishinomori. Regardless of contributing drastically to the medium of manga, Shotaro Ishinomori is a comparatively unknown identifier right here within the West. Subsequently, I assumed it is perhaps fascinating to try who he's... Sorry, just some of this grammar. A few of his historical paths and why manga followers ought to know of Shotaro Ishinomori. So, already we're seeing some kind of drastic changes. Shotaro Ishinomori was born in Tome, Japan on January 25th, 1938 as Shotaro Onodera, and later adopted the pen identifier Shotaro Ishinomori. I don't know why they're translating identity as identifier. It's quite bizarre. He released his first manga in 1955 at the age of 17 and later grew to become an assistant to Osamu Tezuka, the man whose work, New Treasure Island, had inspired young Shotaro to become a mangaka. That actually came across pretty similarly. Over the course of his lifetime, he produced an unbelievable quantity of content material, a lot in order that he has the Guinness World Record for most comics published by one author. Sorry, the reason I just got amused by that is it kind of makes it sound like he wanted, like the only reason he was making stuff was to get into the Guinness World Record, which I find quite amusing. Oh, this is one of my favorites, so next. Arguably his hottest manga work is a sequence known as Cyborg 009, which, sorry, but I haven't read as much Shotaro Ishinomori as I would like, but it's quite amusing to me, the idea that Cyborg 009 is his hottest work. Oh, so sorry about that. A manga, a couple of group of 9 people who find themselves kidnapped by an organization known as Black Ghost, and was cyborgs to be able to function super soldiers. Nonetheless, with the assistance of a scientist, they handle to flee and find yourself combating Black Ghosts to be able to save the world from battle. The sequence ran from 1964 to 1981. It has been tailored into quite a few anime, movies, TV sequence, video games, and many others. I'd love to check out those video games. Moreover, it's additionally valued noting that Shotaro Ishinomori has had an unbelievable effect on the medium of tokusatsu, particularly superhero TV sequence. In 1971, Shotaro Ishinomori co-created Kamen Rider, which he additionally produced a manga adaptation of. Kamen Rider proved to be an infinite success. Wow, I didn't realize Kamen Rider was such a success that it was infinite, and spawned a highly regarded franchise in addition to popularizing henshin heroes. Shotaro Ishinomori would go on to supply many extra tokusatsu sequences, with maybe essentially the most notable, apart from Kamen Rider, being Tremendous Sentai, which has since been adapted to the West as the Power Rangers franchise. Tremendous Sentai. Love that. That's basically what Ultraman is, I guess. The effect that Shotaro Ishinomori has had is actually immense, and so it's tragic that a lot of his catalogue is unavailable in English. That's alright. Comixology licensed Shotaro Ishinomori's manga catalogue in 2012. However, plainly they ended up operating into issues and solely launched a fraction of his manga. Seven Seas has ended up releasing each the Kamen Rider manga and the Tremendous Sentai manga, whereas Viz Media launched Shotaro Ishinomori's adaptation of The Legend of Zelda, a hyperlink to the previous. Sorry. Moreover, I used to be more than happy to see that a classic Kamen Rider TV series, Kamen Rider Black, has been licensed for release by Discotek Media. Nonetheless, a staggering quantity of his work continues to be unavailable in English, so I can solely hope that these few latest releases of Shotaro Ishinomori's work continues into the long run. Which, again, sorry. Let me know your ideas on Shotaro Ishinomori, whether or not you agree that manga followers ought to find out about his work, which manga of his you will have to learn, and when you have, what you consider them, what you consider the tokusatsu sequence that he helped to create, and any extra info you might need on the subject. So, already I find that quite amusing. Anyway, next one. Do you keep in mind Raijin comics? American manga magazines have an attention-grabbing historical past, with the rise of Shonen Leap and Yen Plus. Sorry, Shonen Leap. It's just quite funny that. Within the bodily format earlier, then ultimately transitioning to digital, and in Shonen Leap's case, reforming themselves. Nevertheless, an attention-grabbing manga journal from this period, which appears to have largely been forgotten, was Raijin Comics. Subsequently, I believed it is likely to be attention-grabbing to check out Raijin Comics, what it was, and to recollect the trail it tried to string. Oh god, sorry. It probably shouldn't be this funny, like, considering what this is, but I just find it kind of amusing to see my work kind of transformed into something else. The corporate answerable for Raijin Comics was Gutsun Leisure, which was a subsidiary of Koemix, an organization based by mangaka Tetsuhara and Tsukasa Hojo. Together with working manga journal Weekly Comedian Bunch, this choice was made to launch a manga journal in America known as Raijin Comics. This journal ended up debuting shortly earlier than Viz Media launched their Shonen Leap manga journal. It's all the time fascinating how data is all the time relative. Once I first heard of Raijin Comics, I bear in mind quite a few individuals telling me that the journal was geared toward a grown-up audience, and grown-up viewers, the distinction to Shonen Leap, which was focused at youngsters. Nevertheless, I bear in mind being shocked after I lastly discovered that the manga that Raijin Comics had been releasing had been nearly solely shonen manga. Granted, it was noted in an interview prior to the magazine's release that Gotsuin Entertainment was targeting an older demographic audience, and there are a couple of seinen titles as nicely, but Shirley's nonetheless fascinating to grasp that many of those manga had been initially printed in shonen magazines in Japan. Talking of those manga, I ought, they really love to say ought, to in all probability point out what a few of these sequences that ran in Raijin Comics had been. Given the involvement of Tetsuo Hara and Tsukasa Hojo, it solely is smart that their works like Fist of the Blue Sky, Metropolis Hunter, and Hana no Keiji have been a part of the lineup. However, different notable sequences included Slam Dunk, Guardian Angel Getten, and Baki the Grappler. The standard of many of those manga had been fairly sturdy, and it's been attention-grabbing to see a few of them achieve a brand new curiosity from Western manga followers lately, but it's surely additionally clear that many of those lacked the recognizability that most of the manga working in Shonen Leap had. Didn't realize that manga worked inside of a manga magazine. Anyway, the journal initially began as a weekly publication, but within a year ended up becoming monthly. Eventually the magazine was put on hiatus, which turned out to be everlasting. That's actually quite a poetic way to describe that, actually. With the said purpose being, our publications, although appreciated by hardcore manga followers, should not penetrating a bigger market. It was a tragic finish that additionally noticed Gotsuin Leisure dissolved and their releases suspended. There are lots of causes which might be theorized about why Raijin Comics failed comparable to competitors with Shonen Leap, lack of recognizability, lackluster advertising, and so forth. Nevertheless, I do imagine that it also needs to be recognized for the try it made to carry extra uncommon manga to America. Let me know your ideas on Raijin Comics, whether or not you picked up both the journal or any of the collected editions, why you assume they might have failed, and any further data you might need on the subject. Yeah, again, there's a lot of quite amusing changes made into this article here. Next up, we have the vital mangaka Mitsuteru Yokoyama. It's all the time tragic when so many followers of a medium select to solely expertise the most recent incarnations and ignore lots of the classics. It's written badly, but that's a statement that I completely agree with. I fully encourage people, if they're a fan of any medium, to check out some of the older works released in that medium. Anyway, in fact, this beautiful a lot applies to all media, as I've seen that quite a few of those who I do know don't watch older films and TV collection. They usually don't learn older literature or play older video games. This actually applies to the medium of manga, and whereas I've highlighted traditional mangaka like Osamu Tezuka and Shotaro Ishinomori, traditional. Anyway, one other essential mangaka that's arguably much less identified than them within the West is Mitsuteru Yokoyama. Due to this fact, I assumed it is perhaps attention-grabbing to try a few of his works and the impression that he has had. That makes it sound like I actually read some of his manga, which unfortunately it's nearly impossible to be able to find his manga in English. So that's one kind of context change. Born on June 18, 1934, he ended up becoming inspired to become a mangaka at the age of 15 after reading Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis. That came across, mostly the same. After a number of jobs, he finally managed to show his profession as a mangaka right into a full-time job, and he continued to have success until 2004 when, after a fire broke out in his house, he died in hospital. His first main success was Tetsujin 28, a manga collection, a couple of big robotic, known as Tetsujin 28, that was developed by the Japanese Navy within the last days of World Conflict II. Nevertheless, Japan surrendered earlier than the completion of Tetsujin 28, so the robotic results in the possession of Shotaro Kaneda, a toddler detective. Toddler detective, who can manage him utilizing a distant. The manga proved to be very talked about and was tailored into an anime collection that ended up airing in the US below the Identify Gigantor. This collection additionally has the doubtful honor of being the namesake for Shotokan, quick for Shotaro Complicated, which describes media that focuses on attractive underage boys. I mean, you kind of get the meaning of that anyway. One other essential manga that Mitsuteru Yokoyama developed was Sally the Witch, A collection, a couple of which, known as Sally, who finally ends up on Earth and befriends two different youngsters. They really love the word youngsters. The collection was impressed by the American sitcom Bewitched, and whereas the manga solely ran a single quantity, the anime adaptation proved to be very profitable and is often considered to be one of the series that helped to establish the now popular magical girl genre. That is true. Alongside many different fashionable collection akin to Big Robo and Babel 2, maybe certainly one of Mitsuteru Yokoyama's hottest manga, again we have hottest here, like, is that for most popular or something? Is Sangokushi, which adapts and tells the story of the Chinese language literary traditional romance of the Three Kingdoms. The manga ended up being launched throughout 60 volumes, ended up being each a vital and monetary success, winning the 1991 prize for excellence from the Japan Cartoonist Association and promoting greater than 80 million copies, which makes it one of many best-selling manga of all time. The impression that Mitsuteru Yokoyama has had on the medium of manga and anime is really unbelievable, and it's a disgrace that virtually none of his manga catalogue has been launched in English. Let me know your ideas on the essential mangaka Mitsuteru Yokoyama, in the event you've heard of him earlier than this text, whether or not you've skilled any of his works, if that's the case, what you consider them, his impression on fashionable manga and anime, and any further data you may need on the subject. So again, there's some pretty juicy stuff there. And finally, the last one I'm going to take a look at today is newbie anime and manga suggestions. So I've all the time thought that it should be robust to make a newbie anime and manga suggestions record. An excellent one, not less than. Folks' tastes will be extremely totally different, and regardless of the widespread issue being that they're rookies, I don't imagine that one could make a suggestions record that'll apply to everybody. Which is something I actually completely agree with, given that I originally wrote this, but what I mean is even in this context I still kind of get the meaning, which is when you're recommending stuff you always kind of need to know who you're recommending it to, which is why if people ask me for recommendations I first kind of have to figure out what do they already like, and then I can kind of work off of that. Due to this fact, I believe that one thing I'd do is suggest some anime and manga based mostly on different pursuits. In fact, there will be some generalizations, however I do imagine that this will end in a greater record. Followers of Western animation. I feel it's honest to say that lots of people develop an curiosity in anime as a result of their followers of animation and wish to attempt one thing a bit of totally different. For these folks, I feel a logical and maybe too apparent suggestion is to look at the movies of Studio Ghibli, an anime studio that's usually in comparison with Disney. I additionally suppose Mamoru Hosoda movies would typically attraction to those followers as nicely. As for manga, I feel a manga like Unico would attraction to Western animation followers. However, since it may be a bit awkward to come up with, I'd additionally suggest Princess Knight, which is from the identical writer as Unico, and a clamp manga akin to Angelic Lair, though a few of their different manga might show to be a lot for rookies. Oh my god. Sorry, my brain is starting to melt from reading this. I like how it says I've got to recommend a clamp manga akin to Angelic Lair. So I'm not recommending Angelic Lair, it's something similar to Angelic Lair. Anyway, followers of motion. Which I'm just imagining people who are just kind of sitting on their couch, looking at like weird colours like moving across the screen, kind of going, whoa. Anyway. In fact, lots of people are drawn to anime and manga due to what number of give attention to motion. I mean, to some degree, but like Western animation definitely has a lot more movement in it, just based on the fact that they have more actual animation in them. Anyway, apart from the varied shonen anime and manga that come from Weekly Shonen Bounce, Weekly Shonen Journal, or Weekly Shonen Sunday. Weekly Shonen Sunday actually got through. Anyway, I'd strongly suggest followers of motion to take a look at the Vampire Hunter D movies, Ninja Scroll, Hellsing Final, and Afro Samurai. For manga, motion followers may get pleasure from Black Lagoon, Full Metal Alchemist, Lone Wolf and Cub, and the manga adaptation of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I'm sorry, motion followers, but I don't know how much manga will actually appeal to you if all you're interested is in motion. Followers of comedy. So comedy can be notoriously difficult to translate from one culture to another, and anime and manga are no different. Regardless, there are a number of comedy anime and manga that I feel can work for a newbie. I've all the time loved the Slayers franchise, and I feel the anime incarnation is a superb supply of comedy, whereas followers of historical past will in all probability get pleasure from Italia Axe's powers. As for an anime film, I feel Tokyo Godfathers is likely one of the finest animated comedy movies I've ever seen. With reference to manga, a few implausible traditional comedy manga are Run My Half and Dr. Droop, whereas one other wonderful, however extra fashionable comedy manga is Azumanga Daioh. Sorry, so Dr. Droop there, yeah, Dr. Slump. Followers of darkish drama. For rookies who are followers of gritty, darkish dramas like Recreation of Thrones, Battlestar Galactica, or Dexter, anime and manga have loads of nice examples. I feel Psycho Go, Berserk, and Gankutsuo are a nice collection full of fantastic drama. Sorry, Psycho Go, I had to think about it for a moment. I'm saying Psycho Pass. An intrigue, whereas some anime movies I'd suggest are Paprika, the Ghost Within the Shell movies, directed my Mamoru Oshii, he's mine, and the 2001 anime Metropolis. As for manga, I actually like Loss of Life Word, Pluto, and Prophecy, and I feel they may work nicely for rookies. Loss of Life Word, I can't even remember what that's referring to. I'm gonna have to check, well, you guys will know because I'm including the original article. In the event you're simply starting to seek for anime and manga, I hope these suggestions handle to assist, whereas even in the event you're not a newbie, I hope you handle to search out one thing new to expertise. Let me know your ideas on these anime and manga suggestions for rookies, what anime and manga you'd suggest to a newbie, and any further data you might need on the subject. That's as much as that I'll cover today. I do have a couple of other ones remaining, but I think I've spent enough time talking about these. But as you can imagine, while I am of course annoyed at these websites for taking my content illegally, mind you, I do get some kind of amusement at the very least out of the fact that they've been completely butchered. They've been put through some program, and sometimes it's like, a lot of the time it's easy enough to understand what I'm saying, but sometimes even I'm looking at it going, what am I talking about here? Anyway, hopefully you guys ended up enjoying this look at these butchered articles of mine. And of course, I would highly encourage you to check out my blog, to actually see these original articles and to check out some of the other articles that I've written over the course of the last few years. In fact, I just recently went over 365 articles up there, which means that if you wanted to, you could actually read an article every day for a year on my blog. So there is quite a bit of content in there, and I would love for you guys to go and check it out. But regardless, anyway, what do you guys think about all of this? Of course, we know from a legal perspective what this is, but what are your thoughts on these kind of butchered forms of them? Did you get as much amusement out of them as I did? And of course, do you have any additional information about anime or manga, etc., please leave it in the comments below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I would encourage you to use my Amazon and Right Stuff affiliate links in the description below. When you purchase anime and manga through those affiliate links, not only supporting me, not only supporting the channel, but you're also supporting the anime and manga industry. So I'd highly encourage you to purchase your anime and manga through those affiliate links. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.